Welcome back to another episode of the Realm Cyber Talk, a podcast where we talk about all things cyber, security, technology, future and old, all of those things. And today I'm joined by Jim. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, Jim Lowry. I work for Veeam Software. Excuse me, been there for about 5.5 years now. Some little bit of credentials for me, I guess, if you get just to kind of help out. I graduated from Brigham Young University in 2009 with a degree in information technology. And then I got an MBA from East Carolina University in 2015. I worked in the storage industry for the first, almost 9 years of my career, primarily with NetApp, but I had a couple of other stints in different roles. And then eventually switched over to Veeam, like I said, 5.5 years ago. Been in IT and world probably close to 16, 17 years now. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Well, I mean, without getting too specific, or life events and things like that, what you were just kind of, I'm assuming, general IT before, and Veeam is backups. So,
Right.
what kind of were the backups calling to you, or was it just a change of scenery?
Yeah, no, that backup isn't sexy, right? That's not the one you really go after. So I do have a kind of an interesting career journey that's definitely painted a very interesting picture on my family and my career path. So we learned very early on that if you're willing to move, then you can get experience and promote faster in the ways you want to go. While going to school, I had been working for NetApp as a contractor through a support group. I was one of their support team members that they outsourced to. And once I realized that, law enforcement isn't the way to go for me personally, I went to NetApp and said, hey, what do you guys think about me coming on over there full time? And so, yeah, they're like, hey, absolutely, Jim, love to have you. So it went from tech support for NetApp storage in Utah during my BYU days, and moved us to Raleigh, North Carolina, to work on support there. And that's where I became a performance SME and data on tap and how everything works there. However, I became a sales engineer for NetApp, and I love NetApp. Their products are phenomenal. The company was awesome to work for. You will never hear me say anything negative about those people. I absolutely enjoyed my time there. But during an economic downturn, I became part of one of the layoff rounds, 5th round of layoffs in 2 years. And they went at the small mid-market commercial organization on the sales side and removed all of that and just outsourced it through channel partners. So unfortunately, I got cut. They were wonderful about it. They treated me so well. Again, no hard feelings at all with that. I loved my time there. They're a wonderful, wonderful company.
That's good.
But yeah, long story short, as I moved back out for an IBM role, went to IBM eventually for storage, it quickly became apparent to me that when I got laid off, I had to find a job, right? But my expertise was in storage performance. And that's a very, very small niche. It's valuable, but how often do you need to hire a dedicated full-time performance engineer for storage arrays, right? And then the storage market itself has become a commodity. Yeah. Right? It's now, in my opinion, a race to the bottom on capacity, and everybody has exactly what they need. They want simple stuff. And it got to the point where, like, unless I'm an enterprise or a large commercial company that needs really sophisticated storage, I'm not going to buy NetApp anymore. I don't need to buy IBM anymore. I can go to Tintri. I can go to Pure. I can do hyperconverged platforms like Nutanix or SimpliVity at the time. And it's like selling a commodity isn't going to help out at all. And it's not fun. I had to figure out a lot of different things from a different perspective on backup, and that snapshots, for example, are not backups, and why that's true. Because at the whole time previously, I'm like, snapshots for Veeam for NetApp are literally a pointer base where I just have to take one inode directory pointer and add it to a new one. And now I have historical snapshots all tied together. It's literally instant. It's one 4K block switch. That's it.
Yep.
And it's like, well, absolutely, I could do that and turn those into backups. That's a backup. A snapshot can restore everything as a backup. But that was naive.
Yeah.
I was totally naive about it. So it once I, so I had to go kind of learn through those growing pains and internally on how things work. But it's been great. I was able to go learn a ton. I've gotten a bunch of experience in the cloud that goes way beyond just backup, because backup, especially with Veeam, touches everything,
Mm-hmm.
right? I've got to know how replication works, meaning how do I take my crown jewels and ensure no downtime and RTO, RPO zero? Can I do it? How much does it cost to do something like that? So I've got to be able to handle fully orchestrated and automated data center site crash, failover somewhere else. And that could be anywhere, another data center to a cloud provider like Azure, Amazon, or
Mm-hmm.
Google,
Mm-hmm.
even from on-prem to on cloud, all the way down to how do I do simple backup jobs for email attachments for my CEO, restore all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, so I've had to learn Hyper-V to some extent, VMware. Finally got my VCP
Oh,
a year and a half ago, because something I've been working a long time for to go do. Um, and then just staying relevant in the cloud world and service provider world for Veeam has been just wonderful.
right.
It's been so much fun. I still get my mind blown by this product every week. So I learned something new, something I didn't understand, and or in my mind, I didn't know we could do that. That's so awesome. It's just
Yeah.
it's great. I love it here. I have, I guess, the best time of my career.
Well, I mean, I could definitely agree. Um, Veeam
And
is
it
a
is the best part of my
very
career.
well, sure, sure. I guess I don't know.
Yeah.
This is the part of your
Yeah.
career that I've known you, so that tracks. Uh,
Yeah.
but as far as like Veeam being something that is, you learned a lot. I mean, when we
Mhm.
on at the MSP company, when I picked up Veeam, I was emailing you a whole bunch about like how do we do this, how do we do
Mhm.
that, can we do this, is this possible, and
Mhm.
it forces you to just learn a whole bunch more than you need to. And one of the
Mhm.
not to sound like I'm not to sound like I'm the one hawking Veeam here, but like
You should be
Veeam's
though. It's awesome.
Veeam's modularity allows you to be, if you just want to have backups off-site somewhere, easy done.
Mhm.
Easy peasy. If you want to have backups replicated on site and then replicated off site and then ready to go, you got to have a whole lot more bells and whistles put onto it. But it can do it. It can do all those things. So, and
Mhm.
for me, from the MSP side, that's what I enjoyed about the
Mhm.
backup platform is all these different things. But it definitely makes you learn. I mean, me networking wise, not very strong 2 or 3 years
Yep.
ago.
That's on my bucket list. I've got some internal uh, needs that I'm learning up on. Just trying to get up to speed on specific technologies.
Mm-hmm.
Focusing specifically on Azure right now, just the Azure infrastructure.
Right.
That's kind of the new hotness that we're working through, because we're touching it all the time in so many different ways. And it's by far the most popular hyperscaler in the territory that I cover as a sales engineer.
Right.
So, but that networking is a huge component of that. Everything is so unique depending on the service provider. DR as a service compared to backup as a service. Backup is just backup.
Right.
What's your retention? How long do you want to keep it for? What are you legally required to keep? Cool. It's offsite. We're doing whatever. That's not super difficult from a deployment and understanding standpoint of our software.
Right.
Um, but it starts to get really complicated as you start to grow and start doing hosted environments. So it's just fun because the product is so good at doing so many different things, um, that it gets really intimidating at times for partners who are learning it, to see, what am I looking at? There's so many features. What am I looking at? What's the right way to go? And that's where I come in. I get to
Mm-hmm.
I understand all of those different functions and those features and design elements, so that I can say, in your environment, the way that you're trying to attract and make money with our products, here are the best ways to go about it. Because, as we see all the time in really elegant software and hardware that's just really, really elegant, and things look so simple at the end user side to use. I mean, Apple's phenomenal with this.
Mm-hmm.
Then, under the hood, that's incredibly hard to do. It's incredibly difficult and complex to get those different pieces working in a way that is so um, simple to use. And so
Mm-hmm.
I love what I do because I get to help service providers see what works, why they want to do it this way, and how they can adjust for it for their specific market needs. Um, and then they get the power to see of not only backup is actually driving revenue, not just something I have to do.
Right.
And so it's a lot of fun for me to be able to get into really deep scenarios and then help you figure out what's the best way to make money with it and take all that complexity off your shoulders and help educate you at the same time. Um, like it's just a lot of fun. I mean,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think one of the biggest uh, challenges that faces IT, and this is kind of marrying a couple of ideas that we've talked about on this podcast before. I think I can kind of summarize it up by just saying I think the burnout happens really fast in IT because
mhm.
of the cognitive dissonance between the C-suite and the IT teams. So a
Mhm.
lot of times you'll have the C-suite asking for A, B, C, X, Y, Z, and the IT team is still trying to get A implemented when they're asking about part LMNOP, and you're just like, we
Right.
haven't even gotten this part yet. And I mean, not
Yep.
to mention that IT staff tends to be one of the first things that gets cut whenever there's budget cuts because, oh, well, the IT department, I mean, this is a false thing, and we kind of touched on it last week, is the IT department doesn't generate money. It just prevents you from losing money, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But
And Walmart is a great example of people saying that's not true.
yeah.
Walmart has extremely sophisticated IT staff,
Hmm.
and they invest heavily on it because they make a lot of money with it.
Yeah. And so, well, I mean, that kind of sort of segues into what I just kind of the next question here, which is kind of like, you talk about your MSPs and the MSP experience and all the teams that you work with. So, like, what is sort of a common challenge that you see people facing a lot of times? I know with the backup world itself, there's a lot of misconceptions about backups. Like, I've got backups on site, that's good enough. Or there's the
Mhm.
3211 rule.
Mhm.
So, like, what do you from what you've seen, what do you think is kind of a biggest challenge that people face, with adopting backups and technologies?
That's a great question, and there's a couple of things that kind of pop into my head. One would be understanding really what DR as a service means
Hmm.
and what they're trying to get to, because DR as a service is an incredibly broad spectrum,
Hmm.
anywhere from fully automated and orchestrated data center failover if one gets nuked, all the way down to restoring a backup, excuse me, restoring from a backup file.
Hmm.
People will call all of that DR. And to a certain point, it's true, right? But how do you delineate a backup from DR? Because they're serving two different purposes. Backups are meant for retention for long term, where in reality, when we're talking about DR and replication, we're not using it in the same way like they did in the storage world, where like when I'm in storage and they say replication, they're talking about a mode of transportation from one place to another.
Right.
But in the data management world and backup space, when we're talking about replication, we're talking about how do I continue my business and where am I going to get it to go? How much RTO, RPO do I have to have to keep my business afloat? So and if you need immediate failover, how do I do that? And there's an incredibly complex design um, to do true site replication. There's a lot of networking involved. There's a lot of expense involved because you have to have assets that you can go to. So, which leads kind of to my second trend that I'm seeing a lot in the backup data management world is the hyperscalers, IBM, Google, AWS, Azure. I
Hmm.
mentioned earlier, like just in my area and within my partner base, Microsoft Azure is the most popular.
Right. Hmm.
Um, a lot of that because they're resellers of Microsoft partners,
Right.
so they get some credits or they already know it, stuff like that. But there's a lot of people, especially small companies or new companies, that are struggling with the concept of keeping their own infrastructure. And so, how do we manage that? Cloud is becoming a great option for that, or it always has been.
Hmm.
But now I'm seeing a lot of service providers who are saying, hey, I don't want to be in the data center business anymore. I want to stop owning assets and I want to rent them and resell them and white label them. And a lot of the time, a lot of partners start looking immediately into AWS or Azure or IBM, Google. I mean, great platforms, but we usually have to bring up like, okay, that's good idea for operating costs because you understand it's month to month, so you don't have to do huge cash outlays every year for capital expenses. But it's still over time not cheaper to run inside of a hyperscaler,
Mm-hmm.
right? And people get shocked, sticker shock, all the time when they actually see how much it costs to run stuff within the hyperscalers
Right.
because you're paying for ingress, egress, compute. What are the resources for compute? Number of CPUs? Do you want to have geo redundancy so you can have a secondary copy or even a DR option in a different region within the same Azure subscription? All those kinds of things. And it's so complex with billing, and you really have to know what you're doing. You need to have a lot of experience as a financial person, understanding how you account for stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the big trends and things that make our service provider partners so much more valuable because you tend to do things, or you in general as a service provider,
Right.
um, they tend to say, here's a flat rate that includes everything. And that is so much simpler to use, even if it costs a little bit more
Yep.
comparatively to what you would do in Azure or
Mm-hmm.
AWS. Um, owning your own assets currently is still cheaper, but but when you can outsource that and do so with a flat, understood, easy to think rate based on like capacity, I'm paying for 100 terabytes of capacity. Here's my bill per gigabyte or per terabyte, but I include all of the other stuff into that, and you don't have surcharges. I'll tell you, a lot of my partners' tenants will absolutely go that route. They'd rather lose a little bit more in margin or charge a little bit more in competition for simplicity of billing. Just that,
Mm-hmm.
not among all the other benefits that you get from an MSP as well, like white glove services, data protection management, where Azure or AWS, you're just renting an infrastructure, then
Yeah.
you're managing it all.
Yeah. I'm not. I'm not a fan of Azure or AWS. The way it sits, the way it works. I mean, maybe it's just because I'm so used to the ESXi, the VMware environment, that like I expect something that looks similar to that, and that's not really what it looks like at all.
Yeah,
So it's
it's hard.
for my brain, it's difficult to comprehend which machines do I have, where are they sitting, who's connected to what. Um, and yeah, I definitely see that absolutely with people. You know, they see how expensive something is, but at the same time, owning your own assets is great, but you also need to be able to cover all of that, all the facets of keeping those assets up to date.
Yep.
So you need to have
Yep.
somebody that speaks firewall and speaks networking and speaks. So you need to have a more multi-skilled team to keep those up to date. And
Absolutely.
not to say that people don't. I know we used to have a partner long time ago who was they were using our cloud space, um, and they ultimately ended up leaving us not because of any problem that they had with us or any issue that they had with any of the service. They just ultimately decided. Apparently, the CEO was very much just like the if we could do it ourselves, we should be doing it ourselves. So they built their own
Okay.
data center and they migrated away. Ironically, full circle moment here, they used a NetApp. They put one of those in our environment. We copied onto it and
Mhm.
we gave it back to them. But I mean, and that was 8 9 years ago. People moving away from cloud hosting onto their physical, but I think there's a sweet spot. You mentioned company
Yeah.
sizes. You know, definitely some smaller companies will want to use cloud hosting because it's just far more simple. And if you don't have to worry
It
about
is.
having an IT guy who can manage every
Yeah.
single component, and you could just have like if I'm trying to kind of like a scenario that I know we've talked about before. You know, if we're having a cloud deployment of Veeam, we just need somebody who can build a Windows machine and connect it to the storage, and that's it.
Yeah.
We don't need to have
Yep.
somebody who can do the networking and the firewall and all the different things that comes with the systems administration component of the whole environment. This is like, oh, hey, here's just a Windows administrator can handle all of that. So
Yep.
that's
Yeah.
definitely
That's a huge trend. Yeah, a huge trend that I see all the time now. And it's been about 2 years actively increasing measurably in my areas for the last 2 years at least, where it's like you said, it's just so much simpler to go on an operating cost model that is easy to understand and know what to do.
mm-hmm,
And I mean, there's no margin in hardware.
right,
You in order to get the price range down through economies of scale, so that you can make money on hardware systems that you're reselling, like what Amazon does, or partners like 1111, or that are
mm-hmm,
just huge. They have huge capital investment in that, and they're spending hundreds of millions, I'm sure, in hardware all the time, every
right,
year.
yeah,
And but they're still only making, if that, like a 2% margin, because the money is not there. The money comes from managed services.
right,
So a lot of partners, it's been the Wild West as far as MSPs have been going for the last 10 years or so. But in the last year and year and a half, you're starting to see them consolidate a lot, acquisition, merger, and really starting to take advantage of working together more and
right,
consolidating and getting better results that way. But when they do that, by far, the majority of them are either now getting out of the data center entirely, or are actively moving everything out, especially the DR sites. Those are almost always going into the cloud for the newer partners,
right,
um, where they're like you mentioned, kind of like where should one be? Because all cloud versus all on-prem. You're right. I agree with you. It shouldn't be either way. Hybrid makes the most sense.
yeah,
Your crown jewels and enough capacity to handle, your where 99% of your workloads recovered within a week or something, days 8 and on, you almost never touch, right? That's the kind of stuff that makes sense to have your team keep control over in your data centers on-prem, um, if that's what you want to do, um, and then have everything else kind of go to whatever platform you want. But even that's starting to change. I'm seeing a lot of partners who are just, let's just put it all in Azure and resell it. Let's put it all in AWS and just
mm-hmm,
white label and resell it, and make the money on the cash cows like you should be with managed services. So like you had mentioned previously, IT is almost always the first thing that gets laid off or outsourced, and that's because, in my opinion, senior leadership has no idea what they're doing, and they look and see that how much it costs to keep the hardware and the IT staff employed there. But then whenever they walk around the IT staff's office space, they all look like they're doing nothing. They're playing video games or whatever, reading a book, just doing stuff in the background, and everybody looks like, well, they're not even doing their job. Get rid of them. It's like,
right,
but that's because you don't know what the hell you're talking about. A good and a great IT team looks like they're not doing anything at all,
yeah,
because everything is in good oiled machine, and they're maintaining it properly. And when you get rid of them, okay, that's your decision. You're the owner, but you're making a dumb decision unless you're planning to just outsource all of it. As a
right,
unfortunate reality for a lot of people during the COVID years, a lot of the IT staff were the first cut.
yeah,
But my service providers, especially the good ones, doubled their revenue,
yeah,
because it was the first time that everybody was laying off IT staff at the same time, and they needed somewhere to go. Um, anyway, sorry, good tangent.
yeah. Well, we're well known for staying on track here.
Yeah,
So that's kind of a decent segue ish. Again, apparently, I love saying that. To kind of the last question, comment, concern, which is just something that you've picked up on. I mean, I know you mentioned the COVID years, so maybe there's something that happened in there, something you've learned or picked up on throughout your years, um, that you think would be better to kind of like explain to people of a pitfall to avoid, something that you've learned the hard way that people should avoid having to learn the hard way, because it's problematic if you don't do it the right way, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many different ways to kind of to go down that. 365. So what I've learned over the years with 365 is that gets hosted. Um, there's just not an, I mean, we have over 17 million users protected using Veeam Backup for 365, but that's 17 million, and we're by far, the largest single protection platform. You know, we have competitors, Datto, a couple others and they do a great job with what they do, but their market's a little different focused than ours.
Right, of course.
But nobody's even close to what we're doing. And there's an estimated like 250 million mailboxes in Microsoft 365
Suddenly your
that are
17
not
doesn't
getting
seem like that much.
exactly. Why on earth are we not? Why would a service provider not push that? And it's incredibly powerful, and it's a wide open market. The COVID years, that was the quickest way that I saw all of my partners who did it quickly added 50% to their revenue stream just by adding 365.
Easily, yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it was awesome to see, but it was still weird to see how some partners like, we don't want to do that. You know, it looks, we're not there yet. My customers don't want that. Well, it's because they don't know.
Yeah.
Now Microsoft is saying, hey, by the way, and they've been saying this for years. And so this is not a new announcement, but they're like, we do not protect your data. We give you infrastructure and we guarantee your infrastructure to be up. You're in charge of protecting your own stuff.
Right.
The marriage of adding in workloads through 365 protection, even if you're not using Veeam, if you're a different platform for that, but you should always use Veeam because we're the best.
Of course.
It's a wide open market right there with billions of untapped revenue stream. Go after it, man. Go get it.
Yeah.
You'd be foolish not to.
Yeah.
And then
Absolutely.
educate your customers on why they need to protect all that stuff. Your team's data, your exchange data.
Yeah. And I mean, I know I can speak from our own experience from the MSP side that the biggest issue with the buy-in from customers on Office 365 is education.
Yeah.
Because a lot of
They think
times
they
they're
don't
just
need it.
like, oh, it's cloud, it's already covered, it's already backed up, and it's like, yeah, but Microsoft literally
Exactly.
has a disclaimer on their site that says we do not guarantee your data. You will always
Yeah, and
have
it's not
access to it, but if a mailbox just throws up on itself and deletes every, if Susan's email inbox just gets deleted because of whatever happens, Microsoft is just going to say, we'll just recreate the account. Here you go.
yeah.
And like there's
Yep.
the data's just gone, and it's just people don't understand that. And I think that, again, going back to what we've discussed with various different topics on here, is it's the education. Office 365
Absolutely.
seems like such a weird backup option because you're like, oh, it's in the cloud, why would I need to? But like, you need to back that up because Microsoft straight up tells you they don't do anything to protect it.
Yeah, and they don't make that hidden, right? I mean, that's not just in a legal print somewhere that's hard to find. They've been saying it publicly for years, and it's like, here's the disclaimer, like you mentioned, we don't do this. You're in charge of your data. We're just giving you infrastructure.
Right.
So whenever, because their infrastructure is virtualized, so you might be able to benefit from having data there through Azure snapshots that might still be there to recover the hardware, but it would, at best, it's crash consistent and not application consistent.
Right.
So you just got to understand what your risk levels are and recognize that can be a big one. It's actually the primary vector of attack right now if we're seeing with ransomware, according to our ransomware research paper that we've got published at Veeam every year.
Yeah.
That almost all of them are going after the 365 applications.
I mean, not to put on the evil hat, but I mean that's the big weak link. The big buzzword for a long time was backups. Have backups, have backups, have backups. So now it's become less lucrative to go after infrastructure itself because people have backups. And unless you're, I don't know, MGM, but say la vie. But Office 365 is, it's kind of, it's, I don't even want to say like it's a new frontier, but it's definitely a frontier that people aren't backing up as they should. So
Yes.
it's really easy for them to target that. It's anytime there's a new thing that hits the market, a lot of times is people think it's safe. Oh, because it's new, it's new. People, oh, they're not gonna. But at the same time, simply because it's new doesn't mean it's safe, and doesn't mean it's infallible to hacks.
Yeah.
Something we've mentioned a lot is, if you're going to be targeted, you're going to get targeted, and they're going to find
You,
ways to
you,
get in.
yeah. Everybody is going to get hit with ransomware, and probably at some point in the future won't discover it until after it's already hit your systems. It's
Exactly.
just inevitable way of life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that I mean, but for me here, I think that'll kind of wrap us up here. But I do kind of want to leave on that idea, um, that you kind of just touched on, which is that nothing in the backup technology world is a one thing fits all. Like, you can't just
Yes.
have a backup and call it a day. You can't just turn on immutability and call it a day, because there's so many other ways. You may have an immutable repository on your Linux machine, but if they come in and they nuke your ESXi environment, cool, your repository has your backups, but you got to rebuild your ESXi now and do that first. So sure,
Or
it'll
what's to
cut
stop a
down.
root user from deleting? What's to stop a root user from deleting an immutable volume
Yeah,
in Linux?
exactly. So like,
Nothing. They
yeah,
have complete control.
yeah, and that's kind of the issue that we see over, is that as these technologies advance and as these technologies get more and more sophisticated, because I know there's plenty of backup platforms now that immutability is becoming the thing to sell, but we're also going to start seeing the attackers get more sophisticated, and the attackers are
Yep.
going to start getting more and more bold with what they go after, because,
Yep.
well, the technology is forcing them to.
Yep.
But yeah.
So and one final point to that, what you were mentioning there with the immutability. Not all immutability is the same, right? Some
Right.
some people through immutability is a worm, right? Write once, read many, and that there is no backdoor to that immutable file. There's no God rights to remove it. And we're talking that object, if you're using object APIs, there's a lot of stuff out there that, well, we have this, God rights thing where with X number of approvers at senior level support, a support team can come in, use a backdoor, and then help recover some immutable files or delete or edit immutability pieces like that. And that is not immutability, because if that backdoor exists, it can be exploited.
Right. Yeah. Definitely. I think that's the ultimate final note you can leave anybody on. Read the fine print. Because I mean, it's
Yeah.
immutability is definitely a buzzword, and it's definitely something that a lot of companies are using. But just like, I know we've talked before on this about zero trust, and that's another buzzword, that the way people
Mhm.
implement it is wildly different from company one to company two. So always look into the technology and how it's being implemented and how it's being used. I mean, if you want immutability, you want that true immutability, not, you don't want a backdoor, because, like you said, that's just an
Absolutely.
exploit waiting to happen. But anyways,
Yep.
I think that'll wrap us up for today. So thank you, Jim, for being here, and thank
Thanks for
everybody
having
for
me.
listening.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for having me. This is a great time. I appreciate it, Robert.
All right, yeah.